This video is about installing WSL2 Windows Subsystem for Linux version 2 on Windows 10 Home Edition, and this will be the May 2020 update, which is version 2004. And this is a bare metal install, which means it's installed directly on the computer. This is not a virtual machine. What we're looking at here is my Linux box. I'm going to use VNC to get a desktop on my Windows machine. Now, Windows Home doesn't come with RDP, so the only thing I've done, let's go ahead actually and maximize this, on my Windows machine so far was to install it, apply the updates, and add the VNC server so that I could actually access it over my local area network from my Ubuntu machine. Of course, I also changed the background as well. Let's bring up. Now, one thing you've got to check for is, let's go ahead and bring up Task Manager, Performance, and you need to see virtualization enabled. Now, we're not talking about Hyper-V per se, which comes with the Pro and Enterprise editions, but because this is the Home edition. But still, in the BIOS, when you boot your computer, there's a setting that allows you to have virtualization enabled. That gives the CPU an extra set of instructions for dealing with virtual machines. And since we're going to be installing the Windows subsystem for Linux, we need this to be enabled. If it's not enabled, you need to go into your BIOS and make a change. This was one summary that I found was fairly helpful because it covers a lot of different BIOSes, some soft, and how to set your settings, turn on virtualization in various different BIOSes. I'm not really going to show how to do that. That's going to be up to you, but you can see you need to have this enabled, whatever your BIOS setting is. And if you saw it enabled on the Task Manager, you're all set. If you've ever used VirtualBox, or you've got or VMware, then you know this is enabled as well, because you wouldn't be able to use it otherwise. Now, the directions for how to install WSL2 for Windows are on the Microsoft site, and they're actually very good. I'm pretty much just going to follow these instructions as is. And the first, step 0 again was verifying that we've got our BIOS enabled virtualization for the CPU. And I'm just going to go ahead and, let's bring up a PowerShell. And let's run that as administrator. So run as administrator. So I went ahead and increased the font size so it'd be visible. Let's increase the font size here as well. And just go ahead and copy this command. Control C, Control V. So we've enabled the feature for Windows Subsystem for Linux. That's the first step. Actually, this step is just to verify that we've got the right version of Windows. So we can do WinR, WinVersion, WINVER. And we see this is Windows 10, version 2004, Windows 10 2004, build 19041 or higher, 19041. And this is being recorded in early October 2020. So we've got the right version. Now let's go ahead and enable the virtual machine feature, which at least on Windows Home is not going to be by default enabled. Again, we're going to be running Windows subsystem for Linux basically on a hypervisor layer. And that hypervisor is what allows a virtual machine to run. But it's all kind of taken care of behind the scenes for you when you're doing this. For the most part, they're improving that. So we're enabling another feature for virtual machines. Now, after enabling the virtual machine feature, we need to restart our machine to complete the WSL install. Otherwise, we won't be able to update to WSL2 because the WSL1 install hasn't yet happened. So go ahead and reboot this machine. So my Windows machine has been rebooted. Now we're going to go ahead and do the WSL2 update. Go ahead and run this. Allow it to make changes to our system. And we're done. Now we need to set WSL2 as the default version of WSL. Let's get my PowerShell back as administrator. So WSL okay. Choose a kernel. So I'm going to go to the Microsoft Store and we're going to look for Ubuntu. And we want 20.04, that's the latest version as of this recording. 20.04 LTS. So we go ahead and install this. Now we're going to go ahead and launch it, which means we're going to actually be installing it. This is similar to the actual Ubuntu install on a new machine. Enter a new Unix username. And there we have it. We're logged on to a bash shell under Ubuntu. We can check that we have WSL2 by in a PowerShell here, running as administrator, WSL-list verbose. And we see we've got Ubuntu 20.04 running and the version is 2, meaning WSL2. Let's go ahead and update our Ubuntu, just like we had to update Windows after it was installed. And so we'll do sudo to run a user as super user, run a command as super user, apt update, and put in our password. And there's probably going to be quite a bit to update because we just installed this. 100 packages. Okay. Sudo apt upgrade. We're going to upgrade to the latest packages. I'll go ahead and say yes. So that finished, and now we're going to follow the next recommendation on the very same web page where we installed WSL2. Again, this is a Microsoft document that's accurate, which is nice. This is, look at the date, by the way. This was written on September 15th, 2020. That's the version of this document that is working well. And we're going to go ahead and follow the recommendation to install Windows Terminal. This is actually a nice feature. So let's go ahead and install Windows Terminal. Install it from the Microsoft Store. Okay. So I just went through the screens to install Windows Terminal. Go ahead and bring up Windows Terminal, and we're allowed to have multiple tabs. By default, it actually opens up the Windows PowerShell. Now let's do a little bit of customizations and update our settings. So I just brought up Notepad with a settings.json file, which is similar to how VS Code does things in a settings.json file. And what we're going to do just to make the terminal look like a standard Ubuntu one, There are color schemes in the Windows terminal, and you can create your own. You can read about how to do this. It comes with several installed, but you can also add a custom one. And I'm going to go with the custom one for Ubuntu. So again, I'm under Custom Color Schemes Guide from Windows. Custom Terminal Gallery, Custom Schemes. Let's go ahead and hit the details here. And this is what we want to insert inside of schemes in our JSON file. Again, all I'm doing now is just making the colors for the Ubuntu terminal to be what they are on Ubuntu. And try and get these parentheses about right. We'll install a better editor soon. Save it. So we got the new color scheme into the settings.json file, but now we have to actually tell the terminal, at least for Ubuntu, to use this new color scheme, which is called a Raspberry. Let's go back here, find Ubuntu 2004. So this color scheme name should match in spelling exactly this name right here. And we put this under Ubuntu. We save the settings, and now we see we have the color scheme for Ubuntu and this scheme for PowerShell. Let's go ahead and use one of the built-in schemes for the PowerShell. Looks like it's spelled Campbell PowerShell. Copy this. Go ahead into our JSON. Here's our Windows PowerShell. Save this. And go back to our new terminal, and now we have what looks like a Windows PowerShell and the Ubuntu. And we're all set up. Again, we're running Ubuntu 20.04 on Windows directly. Well, it's running on the hypervisor, which means the disadvantage here, and this does matter to some people, is because this runs on the hypervisor, it kind of either or as of October 2020, you can't actually run VirtualBox or VMware and Windows Subsystem for Linux. You can't do both. It's one or the other. But for those people who want to work with Linux and at the same time they don't actually need a virtual machine, they want the same integrated environment, this is great. If you actually need VirtualBox in addition to this, you're going to have to wait a little bit, and an upcoming release of Windows will allow you, an update to Windows, will allow you to run both Windows Subsystem for Linux and a VirtualBox or VMware virtual machine. The other thing to note, as of this particular update, this is before Halloween, there's going to be an update roughly around Halloween from Windows. You can't run easily Linux GUI applications. Now, you could install your own X server on Windows and set that up such that a GUI application under Linux would run on Windows. But in an update coming along in just a couple of weeks, Windows is going to allow you to skip that step by giving you an X server directly, and then you'll be able to run the GUI applications directly on Windows, even though they're Linux GUI applications. So that'll be a nice update. The remainder of this video is completely optional. I'm just going to go ahead and install the Source Code Pro font, which is my favorite monospaced font. And we can use this, by the way, not only in VS Code, but also in the terminal that we just installed. So we can search for it, go to Google Fonts. Again, we're going to install this free font because it's very nice for source code and monospace type. Download the entire family of fonts. And let's go ahead and extract this. And we're going to extract them all. Downloads directory is fine for now. On Windows, all you got to do to install them is double click. So let's double click a couple of these and we'll install them. I'm going to do that for other members of this family. So I went ahead and installed several of these fonts. Now we can go to a web page here. This is profile settings in Windows Terminal. And then I'm finding on this web page the font face, font size, and font weight. So let's go ahead and set a couple of these. Again, this is totally optional. I'm just showing you something that I find looks nice. So I just typed in a font face, font size, and font weight into the settings file here. Source code Pro, 15 medium. Let's go ahead and save it. And it looks like we had an error. It's case sensitive. It's supposed to be small medium, not capital medium. So at least it gives you the actual options that are valid. So that makes it much easier to correct. Let's go back and change that to a small m and save it. And there you have it. Now we've got our, also by the way, if I cd, it will take me to my standard directory inside of a Linux. And you'll see what you would normally see, like a .bash RC that you can set up and everything else. This is a full-fledged Linux system, 20.04 LTS update 1, Ubuntu. And we can verify that. Under Ubuntu, one way to look at what release you've got is this command right here. Another way that pretty much works on almost every single version of Linux is you can just go ahead and under etc, everything that starts with release. So there could be a couple of things here, and I'll show you about what release you've got. Shows this is a Debian-like release and Ubuntu 20.04.1 of the LTS. And that's it for getting up and running with WSL2, installing the Windows terminal, and customizing the Windows terminal.